Chapter 9 is all about the labor market, and especially how the individual decisions of workers and firms affect the macroeconomy. So we're going to start talking about uh, one of the more important pieces of macroeconomics, which is the unemployment rate. So the models that we use here are all about how firms both set prices and wages, and then how that affects how many people are employed, what their wages are, and then the overall level of the unemployment rate. And then we're going to talk a little bit about government policy and how government policy has the potential to improve on some of these outcomes. And we're going to continue that discussion in later chapters when we talk more specifically about fiscal policy and monetary policy. So one of the big issues in macroeconomics is unemployment. And we'll see that unemployment is really defined as people who want to be working but who can't find jobs at the going rate. And that means that there is some level of inefficiency. It means there's some people who are going to be unemployed through no fault of their own. Uh, and and that can be a problem, and we have to figure out the best way to deal with that. We're also going to look at how government policies can affect wage growth and unemployment. And then we're going to finish up Chapter 9 by looking at the role of labor unions. And we're going to see that there's a big difference in rich developed countries in how large a role labor unions play. So in some countries like the United States, labor unions now play a very small role, whereas in other countries like Germany and France, they play a quite significant role. So the unemployed, as we said, are people who are not in paid employment or self-employment. They are available for work and they are actively seeking work, right? So these are people who want to be working, are looking for work, but who are not working. So if we think about the entire population, we can sort of divide it up into a bunch of different groups. So if we start on the left here, our gray box is everybody. The blue box is everybody who is available for work, so the population of working age. So mostly we take out children. Some countries might also take out people of retirement age, although more and more people over 65 in the United States are working. Then we can divide up the population of working age into the labor force and out of the labor force. So people out of the labor force would include people who are retired, people who are parents taking care of their kids and not looking for paid work, students not looking for paid work, anybody who's not looking for work. And then we can divide up the labor force into two groups, the employed, which is our green box here, and the unemployed. So everybody in the labor force wants to be working, but not everybody is working. So we're going to look at a number of labor market statistics. So we can see that there are a number of differences in how countries' labor forces are divided up. We can look at the participation rate, which is everybody who wants to work, the labor force, divided by everybody who could work, which is the population of working age. We can look at the unemployment rate, which is the unemployed divided by the labor force. And remember, the labor force is employed plus unemployed. So it's unemployed divided by employed plus unemployed. And we can also look at the employment rate, the employed divided by the population of working age. So how many people who could be working are actually working. And there's a number of different outcomes depending on the country. So they have some examples, for instance, comparing some of the Nordic countries to some of the Southern European countries, where the Nordic countries seem to have much better institutions in terms of keeping the unemployment rate lower, keeping the employment rate higher than some of the Southern European countries. So if we look at the United States, the way we frame these populations is just a little bit different. So we look first at the total non-institutionalized population, and so that's people who are over 16, not in jail or prison or the military, and we can think of that group as everybody who's available for work. Then the labor force is the same. It's the employed plus the unemployed, so all of those people who want to work. Employed are those working for pay, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the organization that measures all of these statistics, defines the unemployed as those who are not working, who want to work and have looked for work in the last 4 weeks. So it's based on a survey of households, and if you haven't looked for work in the last 4 weeks, then you're not counted as unemployed. So we can look at these numbers. So the blue line measures the civilian non-institutional population. So you can see that currently it's around 250 million people. The red line is the labor force, and so that's around 160 million people. And then the green line is all the employed people. And so the difference between the red line and the green line then would be the unemployed people. And you can see, it increased here during the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, then started recovering, and the unemployed is still relatively low. But you can also see that the group that's not in the labor force, which is the difference between the blue line and the red line, has been increasing. And there's been a couple of reasons for that. One is that we're getting older, and so we have more people in that age 65 and above range as the baby boomers retire. And also because the labor market still hasn't fully recovered. And so the labor force participation rate, which is the red line divided by the blue line, has been falling since about the year 2000. And we're not completely sure why that is. If we look at the civilian labor force participation rate, which is the blue line but measured on the left axis, and the unemployment rate, we can see that there is some relationship between them. The participation rate tends to fall when the unemployment rate goes up. People stop looking for work. They might decide, all right, I'll just be a stay-at-home parent. They might just give up looking for work. They might decide to go back to school. But we can also see that since about 2000, the labor force participation rate has fallen by about 4 percentage points. And it's always good to remember that 4 percentage points represents a large group of people. So the labor force itself is 160 million people, so 4% of that would be about 6.5 million people. The labor force participation rate had been increasing since the early to mid 1960s as women entered the labor force, but it hit a peak around 2000 and has been falling ever since. And one of the questions that economists want to answer is whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? It's not necessarily one or the other. If people have more money, if they can have enough income with just one spouse working and not the other spouse, then that might be a good thing. On the other hand, if it means that people have given up looking for work, then that could be a bad thing. And at least recently, it seems like there's more on the bad column than the good column.